Scoring points was the problem last night at Soldier Field, where it was in the 40s and it was raining, and I was very impressed at how many Bears fans showed up the night after Christmas. They could have just stayed home. That place was full. It was as full as if the Bears were the ones trying to get a playoff spot. So I was very impressed by that. Not by the game, though. 6-3, lowest scoring game of the year. We just had the only shutout of the year on Monday night when the Saints lost 34-0 to the Packers. 3 days later, we have the lowest scoring game of the entire 2024 season. And, yeah, it was rough to watch. The only good thing about it, it ended quickly. That's the best thing about it. It was done by 11 o'clock.
Yeah, and I look at the game, and I just thought this was it was a boring game, obviously, but this is a big win for the Seattle Seahawks going on the road on a short week. And now they get a chance to sit back, and they got to root for the Cardinals to beat the Rams and see what happens. But they took care of business. It was ugly, and I don't think they're going far if they make the playoffs, which I don't think they're going to make the playoffs because I do think the Rams are going to beat the Arizona Cardinals. But, yeah, Seattle has a lot of improvement to do, especially on that offensive line, Mike. You start to look at those weapons like Metcalf. He didn't even catch a pass until like 33 seconds left in the first quarter. I mean, I don't understand their offense and kind of the things that they do. You look at Kenneth Walker. I mean, this is a guy that's constantly injured. They really need to move on from him and just continue to build that run game. But yeah, it was something, Mike, last night.
They've been struggling to find a running back who can stay healthy since Marshawn Lynch. And it's been a revolving door, Rashad Penny, this guy, that guy. And the running back position is very physically demanding. There aren't many guys who are built to withstand the pounding and the pounding and the pounding, but they haven't been able to replicate that run game formula that they had under the Legion of Boom because they don't have a guy like Marshawn Lynch who can keep going and going and going no matter what. If they ever find that, they might be in good shape. The passing game last night, like you said, it wasn't great. DK Metcalf, 3 catches, 42 yards. The best news, Geno Smith didn't throw an interception. He was tied for most in the league with 15 coming into the game. Caleb Williams, 9-game streak without an interception, ended late on the desperation heave. But you mentioned DK Metcalf. And, he had a moment in the first half where he got back-to-back personal fouls. He can be mercurial. He can be temperamental. I wonder whether he's even going to be there next year. They got Jackson Smith and Jigba, who's developing into a potential superstar. And I just can't help but wonder. I see enough that just you get curious at what point they say it's just not worth it anymore. And we can move him now and get a good return for him.
Mike, I think you are absolutely spot on because when I look at DK Metcalf, he looks so frustrated and so angry, like he doesn't want to be out in Seattle. And you could just tell he's pushing guys. He's constantly fighting. And I just don't see the same intensity that I've seen from DK. It's almost like he's just going through the motions. And he's probably looking at it like, hey, I'm no number 2 receiver. I'm the number 1 receiver. And to have this young guy who's making a lot less than me become that number 1, you could just tell that he's frustrated. And like I said, to wait to 33 seconds left in the first quarter for him to catch his first pass, and that's one of your main guys, I don't get it. And that's something that they're going to have to get rectified. But also believe that DK Metcalf won't be there next year. I just think a lot of times they get frustrated with all his antics, his fighting, and he makes it all about him. And you can't do that when you're on a football team, man, especially in a close game on the road in a critical moment of the game. You can't selfishly say, I'm going to do what I want to do, punch a guy, push a guy, and hurt my team. He doesn't have the discipline. He's a good player, but he's not worth all the headaches.
When you have a guy who is a high-end receiver who isn't getting the ball as much as he'd want, then again, most high-end receivers believe they're not getting the ball as much as they want. But if the team also isn't winning, if the team isn't winning, that's the problem. Because it's hard to say anything if the team is winning. Because that's when the locker room comes and has a thing or two to say to you if you're complaining when the team is winning. But if the team isn't winning, and the Seahawks, yes, they're in contention for the playoffs, but it's been a drive for the most part. When they get to the playoffs, they don't go very far. They're a far cry from what they were 10, 11 years ago. I just think it does become frustrating, and it does add up to a situation where maybe he wants out and they look at his salary and they think we could be spending those dollars better elsewhere for more production, especially with what Smith and Jigba is doing. They still have Tyler Lockett. They just have to figure out where they're going, what their identity is going to be.
Absolutely. And you talk about reallocating those resources. And I don't understand it. I don't pay a wide receiver $25 million a year and completely ignore my offensive line. I would rather have that money put into my offensive line to make sure that I have a consistent running game and make sure that my quarterback isn't getting beat up every single time. So to me, that's something that they really have to work on in the offseason. I think they moved DK Metcalf because of his attitude and because of his salary and try to reallocate those. The defense is something that I think they're going to continue to build and continue to get better. Mike McDonald, they had the number one defense in Baltimore last year. He knows how to do defense. Leonard Williams is playing outstanding. I think they have the most talented secondary in the National Football League with Witherspoon and Tariq Woolen and all those guys. So they have potential to be good. They just have to get that offensive line figured out, Mike.
One of the criticisms I've kind of stumbled across in recent weeks of the Seahawks is the idea that there really isn't a face of the franchise. There really isn't a guy that you look to. The owner is very low profile. She inherited the team from her brother. She's going to sell it at some point. The coach isn't experienced enough to kind of take over a room like a Jim Harbaugh would. I don't know that Mike McDonald's wired to even do that. There's no player. Like, what's the attraction for Seattle fans? That's why they're 3-6 at home, at least one of the reasons. They've lost 6 out of 7 at home. They had the Packers take over the night you guys were out there. And then against the Vikings, it wasn't quite as bad, but you know, it still wasn't like it used to be where it was so deafeningly loud the opposing team was at a distinct disadvantage. They just need to get back to that passion that used to ooze out of every corner of the stadium, and it's engineered to make it louder and louder. They're just missing something. And if they win the division, they got to play a home game. I think it'd be better to find a way to get a wild card berth and have to go on the road. They're much better on the road for whatever reason than they are at home. It's just weird to see it happening to a team that is so identified with being great at home.
What is that thing that you think they're missing? Is it something from Geno, or you think it's something within the organization?
Well, I think it's both. I think the organization needs to be something other than a piece of property that is being held in a multi-billion-dollar trust until whatever such time Jody Allen, who's basically the custodian of the team, decides to sell it and give the money to the charities that her late brother Paul Allen supports. It needs to be somebody who is all in all the time, indefinitely. Not just as long as I'm having fun with it and then I'll finally sell it. It's got to be like the traditional owner model. Not that the traditional owner model works everywhere, but I just feel like there's no overriding direction. There's no sense of an overriding mission. And, yeah, you need a quarterback. Look, I love Geno Smith. It's a great redemption story, but I think he's kind of hit a ceiling. And I always say there's 3 types of teams in the NFL: teams that have a franchise quarterback, teams that don't, and teams that have a guy that they hope will become a franchise quarterback. And I feel like that's what the Seahawks are. And at some point, it's like he's done well, but he's 34, and this is kind of who he is. And that's okay. That's okay if you want to be fringe playoff team. But if you want more, if you want your fan base to get excited like they were in 2013, you need somebody who's going to move the needle more. And there aren't many guys like that. Everybody wants a guy like that because of what happens when you have a guy like that.
Yeah, with my experience, I played with Tom Brady, and to have an opportunity to play with him and so many other different quarterbacks. And I think the biggest difference with Brady and every other quarterback that I played with was his ability to inspire the team and to always, for us to always believe that we're in a position to win a football game. And I think that's the thing that Tom Brady always brought to us. We always felt like we had hope. And a lot of times with these teams, and even with Geno, you just don't see that a lot of times. You don't see that air. You don't see that confidence from the Seattle Seahawks. I remember back when the Legion of Boom, they could run the ball. They can throw it deep. Russell Wilson throwing 60-yard passes to Tyler Lockett. The defense is unbelievable. So Seattle had a lot to cheer about. Now you don't see that as much. They're not as physical on the offensive side of the ball. Like I talked about the offensive line. Then you got some selfish guys, individual players like DK Metcalf doing what he wants to do. You can't stay healthy at the running back position. And then you're getting solid, not great performance from your quarterback. I talked to Gino when we had him a couple weeks out there, and he's a very confident kid. He's really positive. I like him at the quarterback position, but he's just not special. And that's what this team is missing. They need someone special. Like you talked about, Mike, they don't have a face of the franchise. They don't have anybody on offense that you can say, hey, this is the guy. They have a few guys. They just don't have that one guy.
Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.